Hello, this is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 116 of Gaming with Grief, and I'm just calling this episode Activision Blizzard. There's nothing creative about this episode. It's very depressing, but I want to remind everybody out there that this podcast will hit my website, www.gamingwithgrief.com, Monday morning at 7 a.m. Go there, leave a comment, let me know what you think of the show, or you can go to gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. At gmail.com, write me an email, let me know what you think of the show, or you could subscribe on Apple iTunes or the Apple Podcast app or the Google Play Store, or you can find me on Twitter at JustLittleJoe. So go to those places and subscribe to the show and let me know what you think. And this is not a good episode. I'm bringing Avin on from the Grief of Politics podcast because we talk about political stuff all the time, and this is a local political thing, and it also has to do with gaming. If you guys haven't heard, Activision Blizzard was sued by the state of California. They have been investigating them for 2 years and brought charges against them for sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, and pay discrepancies. So, yeah. Are you there, Avin?
I am here, yes.
I take it you're recording. Everything's good?
Yes.
Okay. So you barely got done with the articles? Or, I mean, I can read a little bit while I think you're finishing up the last article now, right? Should I read the other articles while you're finishing up the last one? I can do that?
Yeah, if you want to go outline those real quick, and I'll have finished this by the time we're done there.
So I'm just going to read, this is just the first couple paragraphs of a Bloomberg Law article that came out on July 21st, 2021, and it was written by Maeve Alsop. She's a legal reporter with Bloomberg. It says, video game giant Activision Blizzard Incorporated, maker of games including World of Warcraft and Diablo, fosters a frat boy culture in which female employees are subject to constant sexual harassment, unequal pay, and retaliation, according to a lawsuit filed by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. A 2-year investigation by the state agency found that the company discriminated against female employees in terms of conditions of employment, including compensation, assignment, promotion, and termination. Company leadership consistently failed to take steps to prevent discrimination, harassment, and retaliation, the agency said. According to the complaint filed Tuesday in the Los Angeles County Superior Court, female employees make up around 20% of the Activision workforce and are subjected to a, quote, pervasive frat boy workplace culture, end quote, including, quote, cube crawls, in which males employees, quote, drink copious amounts of alcohol as they crawl their way through various cubicles and offices and often engage in inappropriate behavior towards female employees. So that's kind of setting up this whole thing. So you finished that article, Avin. What do you think about the charge leveled by the state of California? Reading that original, just the first story, I guess, on the docket.
So initially, like, you listen to this, and it's one of those things, at least from my experience and knowledge of the gaming industry as a whole, by reputation, these allegations seem extremely believable. I would hate for it to be true. One, because, Blizzard has made so many games that I've loved in my life, and so it would be really unfortunate that my money has gone to support this type of culture and behavior. Reality of it is, of course, we never know, and there's been so many companies that all of us have participated in where we've bought products without knowing what it's supporting on the back end.
Right.
But in this modern culture that we live in, as we grow as a society and as we grow in valuing women for contributing in the workplace, contributing in the household, contributing in society and culture, to see that this kind of thing can still happen is just really sad and disturbing. And for as far as these allegations are true, I really hope that something happens. Obviously, California has been doing this investigation for quite a long time. You and I had talked about it last night,
right,
that they've been investigating for over 2 years. So I would hope that they have some really good and solid evidence.
Right.
But obviously we'll see where it goes from there.
So just as a side note, many of the podcasts I listen to, and I've been searching YouTube, and obviously I look at gaming stuff, so I get fed a lot of gaming. The algorithm god feeds me a lot of gaming-related stuff. There's been a lot of streamers that stream WoW that are like, well, I'm quitting. One guy on Massively Overpowered. It's an MMO website. They have a podcast. Something happened and I wasn't able to listen to their new episode when they talk about it, but there's a columnist there that writes about WoW Classic because he went back, obviously, and been playing it. He just released a statement saying, I'm no longer going to cover WoW Classic. Justin Oliveri, I think is his name. And so there's a lot of people leaving World of Warcraft and not covering it. Some small outlets, too, have said we're not going to cover Blizzard games anymore. So that's really going to hit them. You don't get coverage of your game. It doesn't spread the word about them. So let me read the J. Allen Brack, who's he's the, I guess he's like the CEO. I don't know his original
of
title.
Blizzard.
Yeah.
Because
president. He's Blizzard's president, J. Allen Brack.
Yeah. Bobby Kotick is the CEO of Activision Blizzard.
I don't want to read the whole letter. Because if you read the letter, it does really feel, it feels very PR, right? Like he has to say, like, this is just a statement of the letter that came out. This was published in MMORPG, a website, they cover MMOs, obviously. This was written by Joseph Bradford. It was updated July 24th, 2021. It was originally posted July 23rd, 2021, but they basically go into the original story, and then there's just a section of the thing that they cover J. Allen Brack's full memo. But I think this is just a really weird part of the letter that he wrote. Again, go read. You can just do a web search and find his response to this. But this is him talking about everything. This is a quote from his letter. It's like in the middle of the letter because I've read the whole thing, but this is just the middle. Stepping back, when I talked with Bobby Kotick about taking this job, one of the first things I mentioned was a revered saint of the Brock household, Gloria Steinem. Growing up, the value of women, which women is misspelled in this letter, women as equals, understanding the work that has been done for equal treatment, and the fact that there is still much to do, were common themes. This is just one of the reasons why the fight for equality is incredibly important to me. People with different backgrounds, views, and experiences are essential for Blizzard, our teams, and our player community. I disdain bro culture and have spent my career fighting against it. Now, it has been noted in several articles that J. Allen Brack and one other employee, Asif Arabi, I think that's how to say his name, they have both been mentioned by name in the lawsuit. So there's this culture, a bro culture, but they specifically have been named as either being discriminatory or just kind of like keeping the door open or turning a blind eye, whatever phrase you want to use. So a lot of people say that this statement, and especially this middle part about Gloria Steinem, seems to be more PR than actual, no action, all talk, no action, basically, is what a lot of people have said online. Because, again, when you're named specifically in the lawsuit, of course you're going to come out and go, oh, I just saying all this, and I'm deeply hurt that all of this is happening. So there's that. So I take it you read this article, you got through this one?
Yeah. The only one that I haven't finished is the IGN article, and it's just really long.
Yeah, I read it this morning. It was very, very long, and I have something I'm going to spring on you towards the end, which is kind of an ancillary. Yeah, he's doing the shock face, everybody. But reading his
sorry, I should have gone.
Yeah, it's audio podcast. So listening to this and at least reading that part of his statement, what did you feel reading the section of a statement about bro culture and Gloria Steinem and
the hope is, maybe he's right. As you go further down in this article, they actually also quote the response from, I think, someone in their legal team.
Is that Fran? Fran? Yeah. She's part of, like, the CEO team or whatever, like one of the senior...
C-suite?
Yeah, the C-suite people.
An executive within the company. Yeah. You read through that and you would hope. It's Chief Compliance Officer Fran Townsend.
Yeah. I did want to read that. That's a whole other can of worms. We could talk for another half hour on her.
the big thing she says in there is stating she claims in the memo that the lawsuit presents a picture that is distorted and untrue, stating that it brings up, quote, factually incorrect and out of context stories, some from more than a decade ago, close quote. I would like to hope that that's true. I honestly don't think it's true. Now, there's a mix of this, of course. Abuses in the gaming industry are broadly discussed and known. People want to get into the gaming industry so much that they will deal with being treated like dirt, so they can stay in the industry.
Yeah, that was something
into the industry.
That was something that was brought up too. As a quick aside, a lot of people have brought up, imagine how much better these games that we play would be if people did not have to deal with this on a constant basis of being harassed, or just the harassment part aside, just people wasting time drinking at work, not working, stuff like that is,
Well, and I really honestly have to wonder too, right? Like, if this is what's going on, like, what percentage of the workforce is just okay with it and turning a blind eye because they're living their dream job? They've got their job doing game design, doing, engines, back end, whatever they're doing, that like they're part of making these things that they grew up with and that they loved. So, how many people are downplaying it? Like, it's really not that bad. How many of these women have just kind of pushed it off and pushed it off and pushed it off if the accusations are true, because they're doing what they love and they just want to be there so much. The other aspect of it, though, for me is like, later on in the other articles they're going to talk about it. You and I talked about this too, was the kind of the discussion of walkouts, of unionization, of crunch time. I mean, and how much writing has been done in the gaming world over the last, 5-10 years about crunch time and finishing up games and getting games in, and just the assumption you are going to do this or you're out of the job. That's just pervasive in an industry like this. And if the big guys can do it, like, what's to stop the smaller players from doing it?
Funny note, this is just an aside. There was a game that came out last year called Hades. It was done by a smaller developer. They've released several games. They released Bastion. They've released Pyre. They've released Transistor. All won awards, made money. Hades won Game of the Year through many people, through many outlets. I think GDC. Anyway, it won a lot of awards. It made a lot of money. And they made a public statement. They said, we did not crunch on this game. We worked 40 hours a week. We had the game in early access. We took in feedback. It took us 2 years or 3 years to develop the game, and we shipped it, and we didn't work overtime. So there is this thing of smaller teams. Slime Rancher was another game that's an independent game that's on the Epic Store. It's like a Pokemon game from what I can see. The trailers I've seen, I haven't played it. I played Hades, but Slime Rancher was another one. The developers came out and said, we did not crunch making this game. So it is possible. And
it's such a big deal in the industry that individual gaming developers can publicly come out and say, we didn't crunch, we didn't participate in this thing in our culture, which is sad for an industry as a whole. So, part of me has to wonder, like, maybe Fran Townsend's accusations or statements that, like, hey, this is old stuff, like, we've worked hard to fix this, is accurate. Maybe they've taken care of a lot of that. But they're still doing the crunch time, and they're still mistreating their employees, and that's why they're walking out. Because for me, I really want to believe the accusations just based off of the incense of their employees at the response. Like, was it something like 1,000 employees walked out or something?
I don't know if they had the full number, because they said... They took photos from... That's actually in the IGN article that's next. They talk about when they walked out, which I don't want to read the whole thing. You're right. It's very long. But I just want to take some of the pull quotes, the ones in bold that are like 20 font.
Mm-hmm.
One employee said, we had the illusion that every voice matters. We had the illusion of the values. They were good values, but they were very much used by some people. And then another one is World of Warcraft makes money. So the people at the top of World of Warcraft are untouchable, which means they get away with lots of shit. So
100% believe it.
yeah, and then there's another one from a woman. Men would walk into the breastfeeding room. There was no way to lock the door. They would just stare, and I would have to scream at them to leave.
Yeah.
And then another poll quote, up until this lawsuit broke, most people weren't talking about the problems at Blizzard in the same way they are now, which is important. And then right here, like this kind of goes into your quote. I think it's really easy to groom people who are vulnerable financially, who really believe that what they're doing is good. So it's the idea that, yeah, you got your job in game development, so everything is fine. There is also in this report, I didn't really want to talk about it, but it's pretty dark, that apparently there was someone being harassed so much. She was on a work trip and she committed suicide, allegedly. One of the people that was harassing her was on the work trip, and it was just one of those, I don't know how to phrase it, but it was basically like she had to go with him, and she had just had enough, I guess. Couldn't take it anymore.
And they go into detail in the articles, and they talk a little bit about the harassment that she had been going through. And yeah, I mean, it's understandable, and it's extremely unfortunate that the company had pushed that hard, or not that hard, but the company didn't protect its people better.
Right.
That they allowed that level of culture to persist.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, as an aside, I haven't played a Blizzard game in a long time. Not only, I think they mishandled the Hong Kong thing with Blitzchung like a year ago, 2 years ago, probably longer. There was the Hearthstone thing where it was like freedom for Hong Kong, and that's all he said. Blizzard is owned, Tencent owns a little bit of Blizzard, Activision or something, and so they clamped down. Blitzchung was excised from the competition he was in. They took away his money or something. It was a big thing. Jalen Brack said, oh, yeah, we should have handled that differently, like at the next year's BlizzCon, and then kind of moved on. And it was kind of after that I was like, oh, this is all lip service. So I stopped playing Blizzard games, but on top of it, the quality of their games has gone down recently in years. It seems like every World of Warcraft expansion, the fans kind of don't like it as much. It doesn't hit the same way. They've been delaying patches for the new World of Warcraft. Classic is giving them money. World of Warcraft 3 reforged the RTS. They re-released it. There was an article that came out a while ago that said basically the team asked for more money and time and was not given that time and money. And so they had to do certain things or couldn't do certain things that they promised in the pre-release version to the launch version. So, and they also, the weird thing about that game is you can't play the original World of Warcraft 3 because of the way they remade it. If you go to the Blizzard launcher, Battle.net, and try to download it, they've rewritten the code so all you can download is the reforged version. You can't play the original one unless you have like a disk drive or something and disconnect it from the internet, which is kind of hard if you're playing an RTS against people online. So it's like this weird thing where they, and then Diablo 4, I have no idea when that's coming out. Like Overwatch 2, like Overwatch is a massive deal, don't get me wrong, but like Overwatch 2, the messaging has been weird. They finally came out with a presentation a while back and said, okay, this is what you're getting, which was nice, but like it just seems like all this stuff is hitting differently. And so that's kind of like that. But what I wanted to spring upon you, Ubisoft a year ago went through something very similar. I don't know if you know about that. So yeah. Ubisoft, basically some people wrote a letter and, they wanted all this stuff to change. Yves Guillemot, who's the head of Ubisoft, he's the owner, like it's his family, I guess, that owns a controlling share of Ubisoft, said, yes, we hear you, we're trying to make changes. So when all this started to happen, I'm not going to read the whole letter, but Ubisoft wrote a letter saying, we stand with Activision Blizzard. It was signed by 500 employees, I believe, or 1,000 employees, and they said, we want change, and basically outlined the same things that Blizzard wanted. We want active change. So Yves Guillemot sent out an email to everybody saying, we hear you. Again, I'm just paraphrasing all this because I want to get to the meat, which I'm actually going to read the quote. So Yves Guillemot wrote another letter internally to the employees of Activision. It went out company-wide. And basically, we hear you. We have made changes. We've given new training. We have new reporting tools. We've let some people go. We're trying to make changes. And the employees they wrote another letter, and I'm just going to read this whole thing because there's something in here that's very important. So, Avin, you just get to listen to this because, again, this is what I'm springing on you in the middle of this podcast. This is from the employees. It's in a response to Yves Guillemot's letter. It says, to the management of Ubisoft, we want to say that we have read and acknowledged the public response and the message from Yves tonight. It seems, however, that the majority of our demands were sidelined and few of our points have been addressed. We are aware that the company has made some improvements, and we are happy to hear that Yves and the leadership team agree that it is not enough. However, Ubisoft continues to protect and promote known offenders and their allies. We see management continuing to avoid the issue. It is also worth clarifying that an invitation to reach out to the company management personally is not the same as having a collective seat at the table. We look forward to a full response to all of our issues raised and all of our demands. And these are bullet points. Stop promoting and moving known offenders from studio to studio, team to team with no repercussions. This cycle needs to stop. We want a collective seat at the table to having meaningful say in how Ubisoft as a company moves forward from here. Cross-industry collaboration to agree to a set of ground rules and processes that all studios can use to handle these offenses in the future. This collaboration must heavily involve employees in non-management positions and union representation. Whew. By being the first to start this collaboration, Ubisoft has an opportunity to be at the forefront of creating a better future for the gaming industry. We demand this work be done in collaboration with employees at all levels. We want to see real, fundamental change within Ubisoft and across our industry for the sake of our members. Again, we look forward to a response that addresses all the issues raised and properly acknowledges our demands. Now, the reason I bring that up is you and I have talked privately, and I think a lot of people have talked about unionization. One of the stories I did not read was the fact that Activision Blizzard has hired a firm that has been known to help Amazon bust unions, which we talked privately before this when I wanted to have you on the show, and you were right. Amazon did not vote to unionize. There was a plant in Alabama, and they decided not to unionize, which I don't understand, but that was their choice. But this is amazing that a group of developers is saying we want a collective seat at the table, which to me means unionization. So I don't know what that's going to turn into.
First off, just sort of reference to it, the third article, or fourth article that we haven't brought up yet was in Kotaku, written by Mike Fahey on Thursday. So that would have been the 29th of July. Just says Thursday at 1 p.m. And they're talking about Activision Blizzard has hired Wilmer Hale, which is this law firm that talked about that Amazon had hired. It's got a long-standing past in kind of deeply ingrained government activity. It specifically with the Amazon workers in Alabama, that Wilmer Hale's advertised anti-union services, and they were actively campaigning against unionization. The endeavors there obviously worked because the warehouse in Alabama did not vote to unionize. The situation in the gaming industry, there isn't a union option, right?
Not right now. Yeah.
I can't think of, and maybe I'm wrong, you're closer to the gaming industry than I am as far as knowledge and information. Actually, you game way more than I do as well.
Yeah.
The gaming industry as a whole, I don't know if there's any actual union representation at any company at the moment.
There is. No, I've heard of some gaming journalists being unionized. A GMO is
But-
one of the.
But that's journalists, right? That's not the actual developers. And there's a couple different ways that it could go, right? I mean, you don't necessarily have to be unionized to have a seat at the table for directing the company. Like, one of the things that they could do is they could give like company ownership via stock to the non-management employees within Ubisoft.
Right.
And then they would have voting control in a publicly traded company. I don't know if Ubisoft is publicly traded, but it sounds like the family that owns it owns
because they almost
majority share.
They almost had a buyout from like Vividia, where there was some Vividia company trying to buy out Ubisoft, and they were going to like people that had smaller percentages of shares and buying up the shares, so they had a controlling interest to kind of buy out the Guillemot family. Yves, I think his brother, there's a couple family members on the board. Yves Guillemot is like the CEO or the owner or the co-founder or whatever.
So if you're a publicly traded company, right, like you have to go to shareholders to do voting. And if the family controls it, like they're going to ultimately decide where it goes. But if the employees have a large share of the stock of the company, like they're going to have a voice with the board because they're going to be voting in the shareholder votes. That's one way to do it. I mean, obviously a union is going to have a little bit more clout because it comes about in a different way. But of course, unions come with their own disadvantages as well. I think if they form their own union and structure and build it the way they want it built, as opposed to using a pre-built one, they could really do something really
There is organizations
powerful
out there, which that's something I could have pulled, but several years ago, this always comes up every few years. It's sad, but there was some organizations out there that were trying to build a gamers, like workers union, and they were trying to get people, and it was always something like they talked about, people were upset, but they didn't do anything. And I think it's because it seemed to be, from what I read, it was like at conventions, they obviously could have space there. It seemed very mixed. It was different developers from different studios, maybe some small, maybe some large, and it was kind of talked about in back rooms. This is such a big deal because it seems like these companies, or the employees inside these major companies, these are two of the biggest gaming companies, in the world. If they're the ones pushing for it, it's pretty amazing, if it happens.
And this is a little bit out of character for me because you know me pretty well from our grief politics and just our friendship as a whole. I'm not what I would call fully anti-union. I think unions perform good functions, but I think the majority of unions in the United States have morphed into these creatures and corporations that are not what they were ever intended to be, and it's formed large levels of corruption and its own level of employee manipulation separate from the corporation that they're trying to protect the members from. Which is why I say, like, if it were done correctly, if they formed the union in the right way to protect the employees, to bring it to the bargaining table, without some of the other failings and other, like, common unions, like our conversation we recently had about police unions and how much they protect officers. The gaming industry could have some real meaningful reform. Of course, OSHA rules and regulations generally don't apply in gaming, right? Because
it's white collar.
It's exactly these developers aren't doing manual labor, or they're not working in heavy industrial environments where things could really go wrong. So there aren't rules. Like when I managed truck drivers, my drivers were not unionized, but they still had to follow all of the federal safety rules and regulations. My drivers couldn't work more than 70 hours in a 7-day rolling period. They had to have a certain number of hours off between each shift. They had to have a certain reset period in every 7-day rolling period. Like those kinds of protections don't exist for basically any white collar type of work.
Right.
At least that I'm aware of. And
yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of any either. Like, I think this, like a lot of people have commented that I read and listen to, this may be a tipping point. It's so many people, and the companies are so big. This isn't and it's happened so much. Again, Ubisoft had the same thing happen about this time last year. And I didn't bring it in, but an article is that also now some shareholders of Activision Blizzard are suing Activision Blizzard because it breaks the federal trading disclosure. Basically, it's basically like they feel that they were being defrauded because, as an aside, like you and I talked about, if people are doing this on a regular basis, they're not working on the games. They're not being fiduciary. They're not being fiscally responsible to their shareholders, right? They're letting this stuff go by, and it's like you're just wasting time, So I think there's been, I want to say at least 2 lawsuits now brought up against Activision Blizzard from shareholders, probably more, but yeah, it's one of those things where, I guess this is the question. Will you? Because a lot of people bring this up. Okay, so you stop covering Blizzard, you stop buying their games. There's a lot of people at Blizzard that want, like you said, they got their dream job. They have to put up with this, but they really want to make a good game. And if you don't buy that, or you don't buy the game, or you don't pay for a subscription for World of Warcraft, or you don't cover their games, then it's hurting them. So it's like this: you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because basically, what usually happens in business, if something underperforms, they will just lay people off. And especially in gaming, when a project is done, like I remember reading about Square Enix when they rebooted Tomb Raider. One of them, I don't know if it was the first reboot or the second reboot, they go, well, it only sold 3 million copies, so it's kind of a failure, or whatever it was. And it's like, 3 million copies is a failure? So like, what's going to happen to Blizzard when you're like, no, the numbers for World of Warcraft dipped, we can't keep these people on, and especially, I think it was last year too, Activision Blizzard laid off like at least 100 people, if not more, because of, like in the esports division, because of COVID. There was other reasons they laid off people in different departments, and that was the same year it was reported that Bobby Kotick got more stock options. And so a lot of people say, oh, I get laid off, but you get another golden yacht, And so I know you don't game a lot, and like you said, you haven't played a Blizzard game in a while, but like, what do you think, looking from the outside, what would you do to, if you want, like me, like I already know my answer, but what would you do, saying if you were a big Blizzard fan right now, what would you do? What would you?
So first off, I tend to not be very knee-jerk in the situation, right? Like,
yep,
we don't have all the data. We have accusations. Admitting there's a lot of accusations, and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that's true. I am inclined to believe it.
Well, the thing that I think makes this slightly different is I believe people when they come forward, because I think to come forward in a situation like this, in a normal, like last year with Ubisoft, I think there was, it was allegations that people come forward, and it takes a lot to come forward.
Yep.
But because there's forced arbitration, so you can't come forward, you can't sue these companies, you sign NDAs, you sign arbitration clauses, just to come forward, that sometimes has to take place of a lawsuit. But I think this is different because it's an actual lawsuit by the state of California. It is not somebody on Twitter saying, I had a really bad experience at Blizzard. Everybody else, if you did too, share. Now that is happening, but it's because of the lawsuit that was brought about by the state of California.
I have a feeling that we'll get more information as this goes along, because you'll get more sources. So, as I say, my typical response is to not be knee-jerk and just say, oh, well, I'm done with Blizzard. I'm not buying any of their games anymore. Right. Everything's done, right? Like, if we had done that when Amber Heard accused
Johnny
Depp of like abuse and rape, we would have all been eating crow, because it came out that she made it all up.
Apparently, yeah, much of it was fabricated. Didn't he sue? Well, anyway.
Yeah, I'm going off on the weeds, but what I'm saying is like, we get into these camps where we support people or organizations that we're fans of, and we find out that we're wrong. I believe completely that these accusations have all the possibility of being true. Right. And I am inclined to believe what's being said. It's a really sticky situation because it's the double-edged sword, right? Like, if you quit buying the product, you're punishing the employees.
Right.
Now, part of that, employees within these organizations are the ones perpetrating these harassments behaviors. It's not just coming from management. Management's turning a blind eye to employees that are doing this.
Right.
And fellow employees are turning a blind eye or not being able to. Actually, one of the things that's discussed in the Kotaku article is that there's really no place to go internally in the company to file complaints because they are not unionized. Right. And the HR is basically inept, is kind of one of the accusations from
and the thing they always say, the HR is there to protect the company, not the employee. That's what a lot of people brought up in the article.
I didn't see that, but you and I have talked about that before. And again, that's the thing where people are like, well, I can't do that. And then simultaneously, if that's the case, and I've heard of organizations where this kind of thing happens, if you're the person that goes and makes a complaint, if that's the reputation internally in the company, then you become the thorn in the side that they want to get rid of.
Right.
You're not the squeaky wheel that gets greased. You're the floater that gets flushed.
Right.
So it's really hard to kind of gauge at this point. I have a feeling that Activision Blizzard is going to get in a lot of trouble, and then they're going to have a very huge fine and a massive amount of responsibility to go back and take care of employees.
Well, go ahead.
For those employees that stay, because, I mean, from what you and I were talking about yesterday, it sounds like there's a pretty large amount of people that are bailing.
Yeah, there's a brain drain, is what I've read. There's been several articles from IGN wrote articles, Bloomberg, Jason Schreier's a really good journalist that tracks down, has lots of sources. He's written 2 novels about the game industry. Really good track record. He's written about I believe that there's like a big brain drain going on. It's just one of those things where where like these people aren't going to be able to go anywhere. And it's one of those things where there's going to be so many. Because, again, there's a lot of people that want to develop games, but, like, you need that senior just knowledge base to be like, okay, this is what we do. And especially I've been here for 10 years. This is the process we would go through to get this done. And if you don't have that, then things really fall apart. I think for me, the way I look at it is I haven't really bought Blizzard products in a while. I mean, what I said before, they screwed up, and I think they messaged the thing, and they did the wrong thing. No matter what I feel about Hong Kong, someone should be able to say something on a mic and not get kicked out of it. Like, he didn't say anything hurtful to anybody. He even said, by showing his face, if you look at the Blitzchung, whatever, by showing his face, he said, I've made myself a target, because at the time Hong Kong was having protests. They were going after protesters and arresting them.
There's a lot of controversy around that. At that
so
time.
he basically said,
a lot of heat.
Yeah, and he said, by me putting my face on this, like, I've made myself a target. So someone like that says something like that, and then you're like, well, you don't get any money, you're booted out of the competition, blah blah blah, and then Blizzard pretty much comes back at the BlizzCon and says, yeah, we should have done better. It's like there's been nothing that's happened. It took weeks late. I think it was like around that time they had to give him his money back, which really just seemed like a mea culpa. For like screwing up. It didn't seem like they learned anything. It seemed like they just took a PR hit and were like, we need to get some good faith back from people. So we're going to give him his money back and hopefully he'll shut up. And I kind of read all that and was like, yeah, I'm done. And two, to be honest, I loved World of Warcraft back in the day. I jumped back into Classic and I had that feeling of grind. We've all played games where you log in and you go, well, this is fun, and I get value out of this. I'm playing Marvel's Avengers, which is the most grindy game that I played in a long time, but I turn the sound off and I listen to a podcast and I punch robots. It's really great. It's cathartic. But you're making the punching fist. But at times I don't. Like, I take big breaks from that. One thing with Classic is obviously you're paying every month, so you have that gym membership mentality, the idea that, I'm not
paying for it, I should use it.
But every time I would log in, you just feel that weight of the grind of like, my character runs slower and I have to go through this zone again. And like, what end am I going to again? What is like all
I
those...
quit playing WoW before most of you guys. I mean, Ben went back like 3 different times and
Yeah,
kept,
well,
like,
he made fun of me one of those times. I bought him the game again, so it was kind of my fault. I was like the dealer in town. I know, I was like the dealer in town. It's like, hey, a new expansion's out. But no, I just felt that grind again, and it was just like, what am I doing? Like, there's so many other games. There's so many other experiences I could do. You know, that's one thing I find is really weird. If you're a gamer, the one thing, I'm not going to say it annoys me, but I'm kind of disheartened by is when you hear gamers on podcasts go, well, I don't really have time to sink into an MMO. And I'm like, you played Destiny for 800 hours. Like, you can take like 10 hours out of that 800, not play Destiny, and try a new experience in a new game, not just an MMO, but any new game. Like, I do that every year where I'll play like a JRPG, and I don't really like JRPGs, but I'll try it. I'll do a racing game. I'm going to play an RTS with you this October. I'll probably have you back on the show because I want to talk about Age of Empires 3 when it comes out. It's going to be on PC. You and I can play against each other. You're probably going to kick my butt, but I'm going to see how my crappy civilization does against your incredibly superior army and be like, well, that was fun. I got whooped, but I'm doing it again. It's stuff like that.
Man, I'm 40, so I am not an 18-year-old Korean kid. I'm not as good at RTS as I used to be. And I only say that because it's like the 18, 19, 20-year-old Korean kids that always win the StarCraft.
No, it's true. Like, well, because they have blazing fast internet as well. So, like, and I heard the country of South Korea had to, like, throttle internet after a certain time because people were just on it all the time. So they would actually turn it down nationally, like, at 2 a.m. or whatever the time was. They'd ratchet everything down because they're like, you guys need to sleep. There were stories about people not sleeping and stuff like that and playing and, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah, I got to find that article, but that blew my mind. You know, there was like 1 or 2 bad
Government
stories.
intervention to get people to quit gaming.
Yeah, that's nuts.
We're nationally slowing you down. You're gaming too much, South Korea.
Yeah, there was a thing with like one of the Final Fantasies. I think it was 14 before it got rebooted, where they were doing that because they wanted people. They were basically hurting you for gaming more, which was weird. But it was the same thing of like, hey, it's the Nintendo thing. If you've ever played a Nintendo device like the 3DS, where it would just send you a thing going, you've been playing an hour, take a break. And you're like, listen, Nintendo, I already have 2 parents. I don't need you to tell me when to quit playing. I'm going to keep playing Mario Land. You know, leave me alone.
They're concerned about your health, Joe.
I mean, they probably should be, but...
Because if you don't live as long, you can't buy more games.
That's right. So I guess we've just aped the Grief of Politics format for this episode, but you know, we do talk about local politics and national politics, and this is a political thing, you know, a possible union forming around gaming. And this lawsuit, again, that's not to take away from the other allegations, but this being a lawsuit that was conducted over 2 years gives more merit.
It's a lawsuit based on 2 years of investigation.
Right. Meaning that, again, even the most conservative pundit I listen to in the gaming space is like, you know, odds say that these people have something if they're willing to take so much time and gather so much information.
I don't think this is a conservative versus liberal ideology in this case, though. I mean, admitting that conservative, Republican kind of pundits have a tendency to lean towards trusting the business, but I mean, the reality of it is if the business did something wrong, then the business needs to fix it. I mean, Tesla recently came out, and it might have been Elon Musk point blank actually was the one that came out. They recently settled on a lawsuit where Tesla had pushed software out to like 1,800, it was a little bit less than 1,800 Model S's.
Yeah.
That reduced their maximum battery capacity. And these owners sued. And they won. And I think it was Elon that basically came out and said, hey, look, we're going to fight every single lawsuit fiercely. But if we're in the wrong, we're going to own it. Yeah. And in this case, they were like, yeah, we totally did it. We shouldn't have done it. We sent the software out to fix it. And we're going to pay for it. And I think that's a responsible thing to do. The gaming industry as a whole has gotten away with this for so long. I mean, did you watch that... the special on Atari, the documentary on Atari a few years ago, where like the guy was going around trying to find the E.T. game.
It was in a landfill apparently, like because they had to bury copies of E.T. because it was like one of the biggest boondoggles.
Supposedly they buried it in this
landfill or something.
The landfill, and they had buried this game because it was so bad that they buried all the unsold copies. And there's a whole documentary where I think it's Ernest Cline that does it, and he goes through and he's doing that, but he's also investigating the industry, and they're interviewing these original like Atari developers about the industry, and it was totally a bro culture back then too.
Oh, I can't even imagine in like the late 70s, early 80s, like whenever, the mid 70s, whenever they were doing, I don't, Atari was my first system, so I'm a little sketchy on the timeline, but what was it like? Like Nolan Bush, people have come out and said stuff about Nolan Bushnell about he was incredibly chauvinistic. It was not good. They gave an award to one of the original female coders at Atari, and she said he was not a good person, but they were going to give him an award, and then women came forward and said you shouldn't give him an award. And he came forward and said, I was a terrible person back then. I apologize. Don't give me the award. Give it to these women that were in the company that were coded. Like, it was one of those things of like, this, it's stuff like that where I'm like, maybe you should give him, tip of the hat at least, because at least he's saying I was a bad person back then. I, give it, like, I'm definitely improved. Give it to these women. That to me says more. That's an action. This whole Blizzard thing of like, this is meritless. We hear you. I'm a big fan of Gloria Steinem. It's like, yeah, where are you? Because
like how often? I mean, honestly, how often in the world of business in the United States, really honestly, like globally, any major corporation, like how often do you see a top level executive not defend their company in the public with this kind of rhetoric, though?
Right.
I mean, when was the last time you actually saw a top level executive come out and do something honest and be like, hey, look, like we're going to fight this tooth and nail, but if it comes out it's real, we're going to go after and fire these people. It doesn't matter who you are. You're out the door if we find it to be true. Because unfortunately, like, especially in these accusations, like, it's the president of Blizzard that is one of the people who's called out flat out. Like, he's not going to be like, of course I defended these people. Like, they pay my paycheck.
Yeah,
they're our cash cow. Why would I not protect them?
I think, I don't think there's any easy answers. I've heard a lot of people talk about this over the last week in podcasts, or 2 weeks, I would say. And there's no easy answers, and I think you have to kind of chart your own course. For me, I'm not really going to purchase any more Blizzard products. If there's one that I see, I might donate to a union like I'll reach out to those union organizations that are trying to start Gamers Union. Maybe I'll give them a donation so they can go to a convention and print some flyers or something. To me, that seems somewhat equitable of like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm trying to support the people that deserve it. I don't want to support, the company fully, but I understand that's not how money works. I can't be like, these $2 go to this person and this dollar goes, like, there's no way that works that way. But what I can do is say, although I'm giving you guys money, I'm also giving money to this organization that I think will do good things. It's like, for me, that's what I have to do.
And that's the really difficult part in this for me, right? Like, one, like, I haven't bought a new game in so long. Like, it's not even a real question to ask me. Like, what are you going to do about supporting Blizzard? I'm shaking my head right now.
This is totally done.
I mean...
Are you going to do Age of Empires? You're going to do that, right? We got to do that.
I will do Age of Empires.
Yeah, there you go.
It's one of my all-time absolute favorites. The last game I bought, Joe, was when I built my computer specifically for this game. And that was a Blizzard game, because it was Diablo 3.
Well, Diablo 3 was a game.
That's not true. The last game I bought was Civilization 6 because it came out after Diablo.
That's 3. Right. Well, there you go.
And that's the game pretty much that I play primarily on my computers. The only other game that I play actively right now is Magic the Gathering Arena on my phone.
I know. We've been over this. I know that you've been playing it on your phone. That's another story.
And I might actually give them some money. I'm debating. I'm like, oh man, it's not free to... It's not, what is it, pay to win.
Right.
Like, you can keep playing.
Well, you just get, like, different card sleeves for that game and stuff. It's pretty cool. You're like, I want the gravestone card sleeves or whatever.
You can buy into tournaments and other stuff, too. And that's where I'm like,
yeah, but you can still lose in that tournament, though. That's the thing. You buy in, and then you can still get stomped.
And there are some cash prizes they're giving out that aren't small.
That's pretty good.
I was just looking at it.
Well, like I was saying, I play Marvel's Avengers, which is like the most grindy of grind games. But that is games of a service that doesn't have a monthly fee. I bought that game for $60 when it came out like a year ago or a year and a half ago, and I haven't spent any money on it. So they had a sale where they were selling skins for different heroes, and I was like, yeah, of course. Like, I'm going to spend $30 and get some skins because, you know, I've had at least 100 hours playing this game of just beating up robots, and I get frustrated and mad. There's lag. Sometimes my teammates don't revive me, but I still get to punch robots. One of them looked very Northwestern. They put Thor in a flannel outfit with a beanie, and my wife came in and saw it and goes, well, you got to buy that one, right? Because it looks like he could just put a coffee cup in the other hand and he would be walking down the street in Seattle.
Dexter?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And then I bought the like they have, based on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they have skins for Captain America, and I bought the one from Endgame and stuff like that because I was like, you know, I've been spending money on this. The devs have just been being paid for me spending $60. And that's the thing. If you don't have a problem with gambling, you don't have a problem with, you know, like you can turn it off, because I know some people can't. It's just bad anyway. But if you can turn it off and you want to give them a few bucks, do it. If you find value in playing Magic the Gathering and go, hey, I'm going to buy into this tournament. Hopefully I win. If I not, you know, I've been playing this game for 10 or 20 hours. I've been playing it for free. I might as well give it some
supporting the
bucks.
pot for other players, and you're supporting Wizards of the Coast. And I don't have a problem supporting Wizards of the Coast, right? Like, over the last few years, they've been doing a ton of improvement in, like, active work in Dungeons & Dragons. Magic the Gathering, in my eye, has made a huge resurgence in the last probably 10 years. Like, it never really fully went away, but I started playing Magic in 96 or 7.
Yeah, you beat me. I mean, I've known about Magic for years, but I only played a couple years ago. I think, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, too. And D&D, too, has had problems in the past with, inclusivity and diversity. But I've been listening to the official podcast for probably like a year, and they have done a great job of bringing different voices in. They've had trans people, you know, trans gaming groups that have come on and spoke about their gaming groups. They've had the one group I love called the Black Halflings, and it's all African American players that all play halfling characters that are in a campaign together. They've had all these people that are marginalized on, and they want to hear about stuff like that. They've had people on that use D&D as social skills in junior high and high school with kids that have problems with that are ADHD or have. Well,
I mean, how long has geek culture, nerd culture, been considered a bastion of white men?
Yeah,
right?
I know.
And the reality of it is that's not true. Like, there's so many different people. They're just really poorly represented, and definitely representation has been increasing substantially in the last decade. More and more and more women are getting into it, and a lot of the misogyny in the white male-centric geek culture is getting called out. It's being shouted down. I specifically think of places like Comic-Con, SakuraCon, where, you know, there was so much harassment of female cosplayers for years, and that's starting to finally be fought back against pretty heavily.
I remember
it still exists.
Yeah, I remember one year I went to PAX, and it was like one year I went and they had like the booth babe, and I got pictures with him because I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I remember there was one year, I think it was the next year I went, they had it again, and there was just something in my brain that it just felt weird, where I walked up to the first woman and I recognized she was a character in a game I played, an online game. I think it was Champions Online. It's some superhero MMO. And I recognized her, but she was dressed exactly like the game, and it was like she was wearing a bikini almost, and she looked miserable. And I asked for her photo, and the moment I walked over to her, and she goes, yeah. And we took the photo, I instantly was like, I can't do this anymore. You know what I mean? Like, this is not... And it was weird. It was like that around that time. It was almost like the industry was like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have booth babes anymore. This looks terrible. You know what I mean? Like, and it was one of those things where you're like, yeah.
Growing society, growing culture, like, we're beginning to recognize that this kind of, what's the commoditization of the female form isn't okay, but it's pervasive for decades in geek culture.
Yeah.
Look at comic books.
Oh.
For so long in the 70s and 80s, comic books, cartoons, anime, video games, just like everywhere. And it's starting to improve. Representation is starting to improve. Obviously there's a balance in it, but it's been so far one way for so long.
Yeah.
That you're starting to see that. And hopefully this is a pivot point for the gaming industry to finally kind of get dragged into growing up. Because my guess is Activision and Blizzard and Ubisoft are some of the oldest names, and the culture is built into their foundation.
Yeah, I also want to see... I also want to
uprooting management. They're not going to get rid of it.
Yeah, I also want to see how long the walkout, because they released a statement on Twitter, one of the representatives for the walkout, it was like they didn't want to be named, obviously. They probably talked together and released a statement. And they basically said, hey, we're not done yet. So I want to know how long the walkout's going to last. There was a developer that develops for World of Warcraft. He tweeted out a few days ago, he said, hey, just to let you guys know, like, we're not working on World of Warcraft. Like, everybody's heads down trying to figure out how we want to move forward. So, like, it's not helping the shareholder. Like, he mentioned that it's not helping us. It's not helping the players. It's not helping the shareholders. We're literally just staring at our monitors trying to figure out, like, what to do, basically. I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically like, we're not working on the game, And I think, people are going to have to, like I said, I kind of came up with a thing in my mind. I still want to support the developers, but I also want to support the developers have a voice to speak. So if that means me giving to an organization, then I'll do that. There's a new Harry Potter game coming out that is coming under a lot of fire because J.K. Rowling has said some really terrible things, and people don't know which way to go because obviously Harry Potter is this massive franchise, and she is, in the past year, said some really, really terrible things about people, and so people don't know how to respond to that, so that's another thing that is happening. And my thing is like, well, I want to play the game because I want to support the people that develop the game. It looks pretty good, but maybe I'll give to an organization that J.K. Rowling hates. So maybe she's basically saying anti-trans things like over and over and over again. And so a lot of people have been like, well, I don't really know what to do with this information.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't know what to do about this. But my thing is like, well, the only thing I can do is these developers look like I saw a trailer. The game looks amazing. It's for new consoles. I think it's for PC. You get to play it. What is it? An Auror, one of the Ministry of Magic police officers, basically tracking down dark magic. It seems pretty cool.
I mean, she's been paid her royalty in one way or the other.
Right, so that's where
the game doesn't affect that. But I see where you're going with, like, okay, maybe I'll give some money to something else.
Yeah, maybe I'll buy the game and then maybe I'll give some to some charity that basically, if she hates this charity, then I'm on the right track. So yeah, I mean, I guess.
Oh, great irony! J.K. Rowling, who was loved so much for all of her inclusivity, opens up on one thing, and now she is a pariah.
But that's the thing is like, I think I heard the best thing from a comedian. He said, I realize that I'm an old white man and some things aren't about me and they aren't for me, so I don't need to talk about them. If I don't understand something or I'm kind of lost, I can just shut up. And I could just be like, and that's all she had to do is be like, well, I don't really get what's going on, so I'm just going to read and sit back. Like, she's literally in a mansion.
Well, I mean, she doesn't ever have to speak again, and she's set for the rest of her life. So
yeah, and that's my thing. If you don't know what's going on, or there's a lot of stuff in the world I don't understand, but I try to read about it. I don't make fun of rocket scientists because I don't understand rocket science. You know what I mean? I'm not on message boards going, those dumb guys at women, whoever at NASA, they don't know what they're doing. It's like, who are you again? Like it doesn't make any sense,
Damon.
Yeah.
I only say that because of The Martian, which was a fantastic movie, and Matt Damon did a great job as.
He did a great job. I did hear criticism of the movie, but it was a great movie. So, but I think that wraps it up. I think I'll do the outro later. Do you have any closing thoughts, Avin? And do you want to plug anything before we leave?
It's just a really unfortunate thing. I'm not at risk of buying another Blizzard game anytime soon. So
they're not going to come out anything with for another 2-3 years. So you got time to think about.
They're not going to get any of my money before they have plenty of time to really work on this within their culture, depending on kind of what comes out. The reality of it is no matter what the lawsuit decides, their staff leaving them and walking out, and the public opinion is going to hit them in the bottom line way harder than the lawsuit probably will.
Yeah.
If it turns out to be true, even more so if they don't respond properly and in kind. And so, hopefully if it's true, and I'm, again, inclined to believe it probably is, justice is dealt out for the employees and the staff that had to deal with that. The people that are responsible are removed. The culture is rooted out. Changing culture in a company that size is really hard and slow, but you start by taking out the leaders that allow it.
It's not that hard and slow. If, like, people have pointed out, Bobby Kotick really didn't say anything until the stock dropped by like 8 points, and then he released a statement going, "We hear you guys loud and clear, and we have a law firm coming in." If he loses enough money, if he loses enough money for the company, these shareholders, I don't know what steps they would take.
The board would oust him.
Yeah, the board would oust him, and they'd start jettisoning people. Like that's the thing with the Ubisoft letters. They said, "Hey, we understand change takes time, but it doesn't take a year. You could have let these people go, and we could have started cycling in new people." You know what I mean?
It takes way longer than a year to change a culture in a company, but it doesn't take a year to fire the people who are allowing it to happen.
Right. I think that's more their point then.
And that sends a message. When you start firing those people, that tells everyone underneath them that they were maybe protecting, like, hey, you can't keep doing this because you're next.
Right? I hate to bring up Friends, but there was an episode of Friends when Monica was a head chef and no one listened to her. And Joey was working in the kitchen to make extra money, and he got an acting job, and no one listened to Monica. They didn't think she had enough power or responsibility because she was a woman. And Joey said, "Listen, I know nobody listens to you, but I got an acting job, and I haven't told anybody. When I'm going to talk back to you tomorrow, just fire me. Because if you fire me in front of everybody, everybody will do what you say, because they'll see that you actually have power." And that's exactly what happened. He mouthed off on her, and she said, "Get out." And he walked out, and then everybody went back to work. And that's what you need. You need those people that were messing up to be like, "You're gone, and you're gone, and you're gone, and this isn't acceptable." Hey, does anybody want an office? Like they start walking down the hall going, "We got like 4 offices open. You've been bumped." It's one of those things.
So hopefully, like, this is a pivoting point kind of for the industry as a whole. It's good to hear that there are smaller developers that are doing things like no crunch time for developing the game.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily opposed to crunch time in a proper application and where employees are properly compensated for it. I'm 100% against it when it's an expectation of your job and it's lorded over you.
There's even a term past crunch that I've heard being called a death march. So it means like crunch is like, let's say crunch is 6 months. Like Cyberpunk that came out recently last November, they were in crunch for like a year. So like it's basically just sustained crunch for longer than a few months. But many developers inside the project called it a death march, meaning that they're just crunching 6 days a week. In Poland, where Cyberpunk was developed, they have to pay them hourly, but developers just saying, we've all said this, you work overtime. Yeah, it's good to get extra money, but like being at home is nice too, and not, you know what I mean? What am I going to do with all this money when all I'm doing is working? So the developers were like, yeah, I'm getting compensated, but like that's not the point. Like this isn't going to make the game better, and we're chasing bugs at this point that we create, so it's not helping anything. Anyway, you and I could talk for a while. I think you have to leave, right? You have a heart out.
Yes.
So, but anyway, I guess that's it. I'll do the outro later. But what do you want to plug, Avin, before we leave?
I have kind of my side hustle, youragentguide.com. It's a real estate referral business that helps people find professional, talented real estate agents in their area. And then I have another podcast that I actively participate in called The Grief of Politics.
I've heard of
that podcast with Joseph Carlson, who's also on this podcast with me today.
Well, I wanted to have you on this show because I keep talking about it, and then this came up. I was like, this is kind of perfect for us because we always talk about politics and stuff like that.
And this one's a little bit less divisive. I think, you and I see a lot more eye to eye on this one. The unionization part, maybe not quite 100%, but
they're not perfect, but it's something, right?
Yep. So, anyway, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. I'm back. Yeah, we recorded that a week ago, actually, Avin and I. And so that was basically our talk about Activision Blizzard. And thanks for joining me, everybody. Actually, I've said this before, I don't like to talk about next week, but because of the fallout from Activision Blizzard, many things changed since we recorded that, and that's kind of going to be episode 117. So just to remind you guys, though, this podcast will hit my website, www.gamingwithgrief.com, Monday morning at 7 a.m. Go there. You could subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes, the podcast app, Apple Podcast, whatever they're calling it now, or the Google Play Store. So go there, give me the reviews, the likes, the stars, how I can improve, stuff like that. Or you can write me an email at gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Or you can find me on Twitter at JustLittleJoe. I'll get better about promoting this episode, I swear, or, this podcast in general. But, so Avin did plug our other podcast, The Grief of Politics. Go there if you like politics. If not, you don't have to. And I think with that, again, episode 117 will be the fallout, basically, from Activision Blizzard and what's going on. Because, again, we recorded this kind of as it was breaking. And then things change. So I just want to have more of the story. So I will see you guys next week, and be safe. Bye.